I buried my daughter 10 years ago. My husband and I visited her tombstone every Sunday for a decade. Her phone number stayed in my contacts because deleting it felt like losing her twice. Last week, my phone chimed at 1:17 a.m. Her name lit up the screen. I opened it. The text read, "Mom, I'm lost." It was her. 10 years ago, I buried my daughter beneath an oak tree at Riverside Memorial Cemetery. Her name was carved into gray granite, Lori Ann Stafford, born June 8, 1994, died March 15, 2015, 21 years old. The funeral lasted 35 minutes. There were maybe 45 people there. My husband stood beside me, but wouldn't look at the casket. He stared at the ground the entire time. His brother had to support him. Lori's friends came. Young women with red eyes, unsure of what to say. They touched my arm. They whispered condolences. Within a year, most of them stopped calling. Within 2 years, none of them mentioned her name. That's how death works. People move on. They have to, but I couldn't. The accident happened on a Thursday night. She was driving home from her college study group. A pickup truck ran a red light and hit her on the driver's side. The impact killed her instantly. That's what the state trooper told me. No suffering, no pain, just gone. I got the call at 10:34 p.m. I remember the exact time because I was watching TV and I looked at the clock when my phone rang. An officer said there had been an accident. He said I needed to come to County General Hospital immediately. I knew. Mothers always know. I drove there going 90 miles per hour. I didn't care if I crashed. When I arrived, they took me to a private room. That's when I knew for certain. They only use private rooms for bad news. They let me see her. Her face was untouched. She looked asleep, peaceful. I touched her hand and it was still warm. I kept thinking she would wake up. I stood there for 2 hours, waiting for her chest to move. It never did. My husband arrived and broke down. He collapsed beside her bed. The hospital corridor smelled like disinfectant and something else I couldn't name. Fear, maybe. The officer who drove us there walked ahead, his boots squeaking on the linoleum. My husband held my hand so tight I lost feeling in my fingers. We already knew. The way the trooper had looked at us when he showed up at our door told us everything. They took us to the morgue. Not the emergency room. The morgue. A woman in scrubs met us at the door. She had kind eyes, and I hated her for it. She said something about preparing us, about what we were going to see, but her words turned into white noise. She opened a metal door and cold air rushed out. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered. Lori's name, her photo, a new text message at 1:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. The message sat there in the blue bubble like it was the most normal thing in the world. Mom, I'm lost. My first thought was that I was dreaming. I'd had dreams like this before. Dreams where Lori called me, texted me, showed up at the front door saying the whole thing had been a mistake. I always woke up crying. But when I blinked and looked again, the message was still there. The phone was solid and real in my shaking hands. I hit the call button. My finger slipped twice before I managed it. The phone rang once, then went silent. Not to voicemail, just dead air. Then nothing. I tried again. This time it went straight to a recorded message. The number you are trying to reach is no longer in service. I texted back. My fingers fumbled over the keyboard. Lori, is this you? Where are you? The message sent, the blue bubble appeared under her last text. Delivered. I waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5. Nothing came back. I tried calling again. Same recording. Number not in service. I got out of bed and paced the room. My husband was asleep, snoring lightly. I didn't wake him. What would I even say? I looked at the text again to make sure I hadn't imagined it. Still there. Mom, I'm lost. Sent at 1:17 a.m. from Lori's number, the number that had been disconnected for 10 years. I went downstairs and made coffee even though my hands were shaking too badly to hold the cup steady. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in front of me, staring at it like it might explode. I must have checked it 100 times before the sun came up. No new messages. The call buttons still went to the same recording. When my husband came down for breakfast, I showed him. He looked at the phone, then at me, and his face went soft with concern. The kind of concern people use when they think you're breaking down. Honey, he said carefully, that's not possible. I know it's not possible, but look at it. It's right there. He studied the screen. Could someone have reactivated the number? Maybe it got reassigned to someone else. Then why would they text me? Why would they say, Mom, I'm lost? He didn't have an answer for that. He suggested I call the phone company, so I did. I spent 45 minutes on hold, then another 20 minutes explaining the situation to a representative named Jennifer, who clearly thought I was insane. Ma'am, according to our records, that number has been inactive since March 2015. It was never reassigned. It's still registered under your account, but there's been no activity on it. I'm looking at a text message from that number right now. That's not possible, ma'am. The line has been disconnected for over 10 years. Can you reconnect it? I can submit a request, but it will take 3 to 5 business days and there's a reactivation fee. I paid the fee. I didn't care what it cost. Jennifer said she'd expedite the request and someone would call me back. No one ever did. 3 days passed. I didn't sleep. I kept my phone on full volume, checking it every few minutes. My husband stopped asking if I was okay because the answer was obviously no. My sister called and I didn't pick up. I couldn't explain this to anyone. I barely understood it myself. Then, on Friday night at 11:42 p.m., my phone chimed again. I was sitting on the couch, phone in my lap, waiting. Lori's name appeared. Another text. I need help. I found an address. My heart slammed against my ribs. I typed back immediately. What address? Where are you? Please answer me. The message delivered. I watched the screen, praying for the 3 dots that meant she was typing. They never came. I called. Same recording. Number not in service. A third message came through. Just a string of text. No explanation. 5800 Oak Street, Apartment 4B, Richmond, Virginia. I stared at it. Richmond, Virginia. That was 6 hours away. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up Google Maps. The address existed, a building in what looked like an older part of the city. Street view showed a rundown apartment complex with boarded windows. I texted back. Are you there? Are you at this address? Lori, please answer me.
Nothing. I called again. Deadline. I sent 5 more texts, each one more desperate than the last. All of them delivered, none of them answered. My husband came into the living room and saw me crying over my phone. What happened? I showed him the messages. He read them twice, his face going pale. This doesn't make sense. I know. He suggested I call the police, so I did. The officer I spoke to was polite but dismissive. He said unless I had evidence of a crime, there was nothing they could do. Someone texting me wasn't illegal. He suggested it might be a scam or a prank. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. Those messages were from Lori. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, but my daughter was reaching out to me, and I was the only person who believed it. I packed a bag that night. My husband asked where I was going. I told him the truth. Richmond. I'm going to that address.
Before I left for Richmond, I needed to see the grave. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. My husband was still asleep when I grabbed my keys at 6:30 a.m. and drove to Riverside Memorial Cemetery. The Sunday morning air was cold and damp. Fog hung low over the headstones. I knew the path by heart. Past the main gate, left at the Stone Angel, 3 rows back under the oak tree. I'd walked it every week for 10 years. Lori's grave was exactly where it had always been. The gray granite headstone stood solid and real, her name carved deep into the stone, the dates that marked the beginning and end of her too short life. I knelt down and touched the cold marble, tracing her name with my fingers. Lori Ann Stafford. June 8th, 1994, March 15th, 2015. The flowers I'd brought last Sunday were wilted in their vase. Dead leaves had blown against the base of the stone. Everything about this grave screamed permanence, finality. My daughter was buried 6 feet below this spot. I'd watched them lower her casket into the ground. I'd thrown dirt on top of it while my knees buckled. But someone with her phone number had texted me. Someone who knew to call me Mom. I pulled out my phone and opened the message thread. Still there. 3 messages from Lori's number. Mom, I'm lost. Then, I need help. I found an address. Then, the address itself. 5880 Oak Street, apartment 4B, Richmond, Virginia. I took screenshots. Then I took a video scrolling through the conversation slowly so the timestamp and phone number were visible. I didn't know who I'd need to show this to, but I wanted proof. Evidence that I wasn't hallucinating or having some kind of grief-induced breakdown. The grave was real. The texts were real. Both things couldn't be true at the same time, but they were. I drove home and found my husband in the kitchen making coffee. He looked at me with tired, worried eyes. You went to the cemetery? I had to see it. And? She's still buried there, but these texts are real too. I showed him the screenshots again. I'm driving to Richmond. Sarah, please, this is crazy. You can't drive 6 hours because of a text message from a dead person's phone. Then come with me. He hesitated. I saw the conflict on his face. He wanted to believe me, or maybe he wanted to believe I wasn't falling apart, but he couldn't do either. I have to work Monday. I can't just leave. Fine. I'll go alone. I went upstairs and packed a duffel bag. Clothes for 3 days, toiletries, my phone charger. My husband followed me, watching from the doorway. What if it's nothing? What if you get there and it's just an empty apartment? Then I'll come home. What if it's dangerous? What if someone is trying to lure you somewhere? Then I'll call the police. Sarah, please, just wait. Think about this. But I'd already thought about it. For 3 days, I'd thought about nothing else. My daughter had sent me an address. Whether she was alive, dead, or something in between, I had to go. I left at 10 a.m. The GPS said it would take 6 hours and 12 minutes. I had a full tank of gas and a travel mug of coffee I couldn't drink because my stomach was in knots.
The highway stretched out gray and endless. I drove through towns I'd never heard of, past exits I'd never taken. My phone sat in the cup holder. I glanced at it every few minutes, hoping for another text. Nothing came. Around hour 3, I stopped at a rest area. I tried calling Lori's number again. Same recording. I sent another text. I'm coming to the address you sent. If you're there, please wait for me. The message delivered but didn't get a response. I bought a sandwich from a vending machine and forced myself to eat it. The woman at the sink next to me in the restroom looked at my reflection in the mirror and asked if I was okay. I must have looked terrible. I told her I was fine and left. Back on the highway, doubt started creeping in. My husband was right. This was insane. I was driving 6 hours based on 3 text messages from a dead person's phone number. What was I expecting to find? Lori standing in an apartment, alive and well, ready to explain where she'd been for 10 years? But what if she was there? What if somehow, impossibly, she needed me and I was the only person who believed her? I pressed harder on the gas pedal. Richmond appeared on the horizon just after 4 p.m. The GPS guided me off the highway and into the city. The neighborhoods got older, the buildings more run down. I turned onto Oak Street and my heart started hammering. 5880 Oak Street was worse than the Google images had shown. The apartment building looked condemned. Most of the windows were boarded up. Graffiti covered the walls. A chain-link fence surrounded the property with a no trespassing sign hanging crooked on the gate. I parked across the street and stared at the building. This couldn't be right. Nobody lived here. But the address matched exactly. Apartment 4B.
I sat in my car across from the abandoned building and called the phone company again. This time, I asked for a supervisor immediately. The representative tried to transfer me to technical support, but I refused. I needed someone with authority. Someone who could explain how a disconnected number had sent me 3 text messages. After 15 minutes on hold, a man's voice came on the line. "This is Rafael Martinez, customer service supervisor. How can I help you today?" I explained everything. The texts from my daughter's old number, the timestamps, the fact that the number had been inactive for 10 years. I spoke quickly, trying to get it all out before he could interrupt. "Ma'am, I'm looking at the account now. The number ending in 4739, correct?" "Yes. That line was disconnected in March 2015. There's been no activity since then. No calls, no texts, no data usage. I'm telling you, I received 3 text messages from that number this week. I have screenshots." "Screenshots can be edited, ma'am." My jaw clenched. Why would I edit screenshots of texts from my dead daughter? There was a pause. When Raphael spoke again, his voice had softened into that careful, pitying tone I'd heard 1,000 times over the past decade. "Mrs. Stafford, I see here that this number belonged to a Lori Ann Stafford, deceased March 2015. You've kept the line registered under your family account, but inactive. Is that correct?" "Yes. I understand you're going through something very difficult. Grief can manifest in many ways. Sometimes people experience things that feel very real, but aren't actually." "Don't." My voice came out sharp. "Don't you dare suggest I'm imagining this. I have the messages right here on my phone." "Ma'am, I'm not trying to upset you, but from a technical standpoint, what you're describing is impossible. That number cannot send or receive communications. The SIM card associated with it was deactivated 10 years ago. Then how do I have text from it?" "I don't know. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that those texts did not originate from our network. If you're seeing messages from that number, something else is happening." "Like what?" "I couldn't say. Maybe a glitch in your phone's operating system. Maybe someone spoofing the number through an app. Maybe..." He trailed off. "Maybe I'm crazy." I didn't say that. I didn't have to. I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles had gone white. "Can you run diagnostics?
Check if there's any way someone could have accessed that number. I already did while we've been talking. There's nothing. No login attempts, no port requests, no unusual activity of any kind. Mrs. Stafford, I really think you should speak with someone. A counselor or a therapist who specializes in grief. I hung up. My hands were shaking with anger and frustration. Everyone thought I was having a breakdown. My husband, the police officer I'd spoken to, now this supervisor. They all used the same careful voice, the same gentle suggestions about therapy and grief counseling. But I wasn't imagining this. I opened my messages again and went through each one. The texts were there, real, visible. I took more screenshots, zooming in on the timestamp and phone number. Then, I opened my photos and found the video I'd recorded earlier. Me scrolling through the conversation, the phone number clearly visible at the top of the screen. This was evidence, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. The phone company could deny it all they wanted, but I had documentation. 3 messages from Lori's number sent from a line that's supposed to be couldn't send messages, and the last one had given me an address. 5880 Oak Street, apartment 4B, Richmond, Virginia. I looked up at the condemned building across the street. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was wrong, that I should turn around, drive home, make an appointment with a therapist like everyone kept suggesting. Normal people didn't drive 6 hours to investigate text messages from dead relatives. But I wasn't normal anymore. I hadn't been normal since the night they'd called me to identify my daughter's body. And if there was even a 1% chance that Lori was somehow reaching out to me, I had to follow it. I got out of my car and walked toward the building. The chain-link fence had a gap near the corner where someone had pulled it back. I squeezed through and crossed the overgrown lawn. Broken glass crunched under my feet. The front entrance was boarded up, but around the side I found a door hanging crooked on its hinges. I pulled it open and stepped inside. The interior was worse than the exterior. Water damage had rotted the floors. The walls were covered in mold and graffiti. The smell hit me immediately, damp and rotten. Somewhere in the building, water was dripping. I turned on my phone's flashlight and found a directory near what used to be a mailbox area. The building had 4 floors. Apartment 4B would be on the 4th floor. I found the stairwell and started climbing. Each step groaned under my weight. I tested each one carefully, terrified the rotten wood would give way. The 4th floor hallway was pitch black, except for my phone light. Apartment numbers were barely visible on the doors. 4A, 4B should be next. I found it at the end of the hall. Unlike the other apartments with their broken or missing doors, 4B's door was intact, closed. And when I got closer, I saw something that made my breath catch. Light was coming from underneath the door. Not sunlight filtering through boarded windows. Electric light. Someone had power in this condemned building. I raised my hand and knocked.
No one answered my knock. I waited, listening for movement inside. Nothing. I tried the doorknob. It turned. The door swung open and I stepped into an impossible place. The apartment was clean. Not just clean, immaculate. Hardwood floors polished to a shine. Air smelled like vanilla and something floral. Air freshener or candles. Not the rot and decay of the rest of the building. I stood in the doorway, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Every other apartment in this building was destroyed. Collapsed ceilings, broken windows, mold climbing the walls. But this one looked like it belonged in a furniture catalog. "Hello?" My voice sounded too loud in the silence. "Is anyone here?" No response. I stepped further inside and closed the door behind me. The click of the latch made me jump. To my right was a small kitchen. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, a coffee maker sitting next to the sink. I opened the refrigerator. It hummed to life, the light coming on automatically. Inside were groceries, milk, eggs, vegetables, takeout containers. I checked the milk. The expiration date was next week. Someone was living here. Recently. The living room had a bookshelf against the far wall. I walked over and scanned the titles. Mysteries, thrillers, a few romance novels, the same genres Lori used to read. On the shelf below the books were framed photographs. My heart stopped. The first photo was from Lori's high school graduation. She wore her blue cap and gown, standing between me and my husband. I remembered that day. It had been sweltering hot and we'd gone out for dinner afterward. I had a copy of this exact photo in an album at home. The second photo was from her 16th birthday. Lori blowing out candles on a chocolate cake. Her friends gathered around her. Another photo I recognized. But the third photo made no sense. It showed Lori, older, maybe late 20s. She sat at a cafe table with a coffee cup in front of her. Her blonde hair was shorter, cut in a style she'd never worn when she was alive. She was smiling at the camera, laugh lines visible at the corners of her eyes. The photo looked recent, professional quality, like a candid shot from a nice camera. I picked it up with shaking hands. This wasn't Photoshop. The image quality was too natural, the lighting too real. This was an actual photograph of my daughter as a woman I'd never met. I set it down and grabbed the next frame. Lori standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, holding a potted plant. Older again, maybe early 30s, same short haircut. She wore jeans and a flannel shirt I'd never seen. Another photo, Lori at what looked like a farmer's market, holding a bag of vegetables. 30s, relaxed, alive. I went through every photo on the shelf, 10 in total. 5 were from her childhood and teen years, memories I recognized. 5 were impossible, images of Lori as an adult woman who should be 31 years old if she'd lived. My legs gave out. I sat down hard on the couch, photos clutched in my hands. This couldn't be real. Lori died at 21. I'd seen her body. I'd watched them bury her. But someone had photos of her as an adult, recent photos. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything, the apartment, the bookshelves, each framed photo. I needed documentation, proof that this place existed. A desk sat in the corner near the window. I opened the drawers, searching for something, anything that would explain this. The top drawer held pens, notepads, rubber bands, normal desk supplies. The second drawer had bills and paperwork. I pulled out a stack and read through them. Electric bill for this address, paid current, water bill, internet service, all in the name of Joyce Hayes. I didn't know anyone named Joyce Hayes. Then I found a driver's license tucked into an envelope, Virginia State ID. The photo showed a woman with Lori's face, older with short blonde hair. The name on the license read Joyce Hayes. The birth date made my vision blur. June 8th, 1994. Lori's birthday. Joyce Hayes was born on the exact same day as my daughter, and she had my daughter's face. I kept digging. A credit card statement, a lease agreement for this apartment signed 8 months ago, medical records from a doctor's office in Richmond, all for Joyce Hayes, all with that same birth date. At the bottom of the drawer, I found a small leather journal. I opened it, and Lori's handwriting stared back at me. I'd recognize it anywhere. The way she looped her Y's, the slant of her letters, unmistakable. The first entry was dated 3 weeks ago. I don't know who I am. I woke up this morning and couldn't remember anything past the age of 21. The apartment, the ID, everything says I'm Joyce Hayes, 31 years old, but I remember being Lori Stafford. I remembered the accident. I remember dying. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the journal. I kept reading. I found photos of a family I know are mine, a mother and father I recognize but can't place. I found old papers with a phone number labeled Mom.
I tried to call it, but the line was disconnected. I texted instead. I don't know if she'll see it. I don't know if she'll believe me. I don't even know if I believe me. The entries continued. Joyce, or Lori, or whoever she was, trying to piece together a life she couldn't remember. She wrote about searching online for Lori Stafford and finding an obituary from 2015, about seeing her own grave in news articles about the accident, about the impossible reality of being alive when everyone said I was dead. The last entry was from yesterday. I sent her the address. I don't know what else to do. If she comes, maybe she'll have answers. Maybe she'll know who I really am. Maybe she'll tell me I'm crazy and this is all in my head. Either way, I need to know. I closed the journal and looked around the apartment again. This was real. All of it. Someone with Lori's handwriting, Lori's birthday, and Lori's face was living in this apartment, believing she was my dead daughter. I needed to find her.
I stood up from the desk, still holding the journal, and walked to the kitchen. A piece of paper was magnetized to the refrigerator, the same handwriting as the journal entries, the same handwriting Lori had used to write grocery lists and birthday cards. The note was addressed to me. Mom, if you're reading this, you came. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not even sure this is real or if I'm having some kind of psychotic break. My name is Joyce Hayes. At least that's what all my identification says. But 3 weeks ago, I woke up and I was Lori. I remembered being 21. I remembered driving home from my study group. I remembered the truck running the red light. I remembered the impact and then nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was in this apartment and 10 years had passed. I have no memory of those years. I don't know who Joyce Hayes is or how I became her. I only know that I remember being your daughter. I remember you. Please, I need answers. I need to know if I'm losing my mind. I'll be back tonight around 8 p.m. Wait for me if you can. L. I checked my phone. 5:47 p.m. I had over 2 hours. I set the note down carefully and opened the refrigerator again, looking for anything else that might explain this. Behind the milk, I found a folder tucked against the back wall. Inside were medical records, dozens of pages printed from various doctors' offices. I spread them across the kitchen counter and started reading. The first document was an intake form from a psychiatric clinic, dated 3 weeks ago. The patient name was Joyce Hayes. Chief complaint, sudden onset of memories that don't match my documented life history. Possible dissociative amnesia or delusional disorder. The psychiatrist's notes mentioned the patient was coherent, articulate, and deeply distressed. She'd undergone a psychological evaluation. Results were inconclusive. The next document was from an emergency room visit, also 3 weeks ago. Joyce Hayes had gone to the ER complaining of memory loss and confusion. The attending physician noted no signs of head trauma, stroke, or neurological damage. CT scan was normal. Patient discharged with a referral to neurology and psychiatry. I kept digging. More appointments, more tests. Everything came back normal. Brain scans, blood work, cognitive assessments. Physically, Joyce Hayes was a healthy 31-year-old woman. Mentally, she insisted she was someone else. Then I found a document that made my blood run cold. It was a records request form from County General Hospital. Joyce Hayes had requested her admission records from March 15, 2015, the night of Lori's accident. I flipped to the next page and saw the hospital's response. Patient records indicate Joyce Hayes, age 21, was admitted to County General Hospital Emergency Department on March 15, 2015 at 11:34 p.m. Patient arrived via ambulance following a motor vehicle accident at the intersection of Hamilton and Oak Ridge Road. Patient suffered severe head trauma, multiple fractures, and internal bleeding. Patient was unconscious on arrival and remained unresponsive for 72 hours. Upon regaining consciousness, patient exhibited severe retrograde amnesia with no memory of identity or personal history. Patient was listed as Jane Doe until identification could be established.
My hands started trembling. I read it again to make sure I understood correctly. A woman matching Joyce Hayes' age had been brought to County General the same night as Lori, from the same intersection, with severe injuries and complete amnesia. I flipped through more pages. The Jane Doe patient had spent 2 weeks in the hospital. During that time, no family came forward. No identification was found. Social services eventually got involved. The patient was transferred to a psychiatric facility for additional care and rehabilitation. There was a note stapled to the last page, handwritten by Joyce. "This is me. I was the Jane Doe, but I don't remember any of this. My first memory after the accident is waking up 3 weeks ago in this apartment." I set the papers down and tried to piece it together. 2 young women were in accidents at the same intersection on March 15, 2015. One was identified as Lori Stafford and died. One was unidentified, survived with amnesia, and somehow became Joyce Hayes. But what if they'd made a mistake? What if the identification was wrong? I thought about that night in the hospital, the officer asking me to identify the body, Lori's face, pale and still. I'd been so certain it was her, but I'd been in shock, devastated, barely able to stand. What if in that moment of unspeakable grief, I'd been wrong? No, that was impossible. I knew my daughter's face. I'd given birth to her, raised her, looked at her every single day for 21 years. I couldn't have misidentified her. But the alternative was just as impossible, that my daughter had somehow survived with complete amnesia, lived an entire decade as someone else and only now remembered who she really was. I pulled out my phone and called my husband. He answered on the second ring. "Sarah, where are you? I've been worried sick." "I'm in Richmond, in the apartment." "And?" "You need to sit down." I told him everything. The clean apartment in the condemned building, the photos of Lori as an adult, the journal entries, the note on the fridge, the medical records showing a Jane Doe patient from the same accident. He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained. "What are you saying? That Lori survived? That someone made a mistake?" "I don't know what I'm saying, but there's a woman named Joyce Hayes who has Lori's birthday, Lori's face, and Lori's handwriting. She believes she's our daughter." "That's not possible. We buried Lori. We watched them lower her into the ground." "I know, but I'm holding medical records that prove a second woman was at that hospital the same night, an unidentified woman with amnesia." "Sarah, this is insane. You're talking about a hospital mixing up bodies. That doesn't happen." "It does happen. It's rare, but it happens. And if there were 2 patients from the same accident, both young women, both critically injured, both brought in around the same time?" "No." His voice broke. "Don't do this. Don't give us hope when there isn't any. Our daughter is dead. Whatever this woman is, whoever she is, she's not Lori." "Then why does she have Lori's handwriting? Why does she remember the accident?" He had no answer. I heard him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "I'm staying. She's supposed to be back at 8. I need to see her. I need to know." "And what if it's not her? What if you're setting yourself up for more heartbreak?" "Then at least I'll know I tried." He sighed. "Call me after you meet her. Please." "I will." I hung up and looked at the clock. 6:15 p.m. Less than 2 hours now. I sat down on the couch and waited, the medical records spread across my lap, trying to prepare myself for whatever was about to walk through that door. I stood up from the desk, still holding the journal, and walked to the kitchen. A piece of paper was magnetized to the refrigerator, the same handwriting as the journal entries, the same handwriting Lori had used to write grocery lists and birthday cards. The note was addressed to me. "Mom, if you're reading this, you came. I wasn't sure you would. I'm not even sure this is real or if I'm having some kind of psychotic break. My name is Joyce Hayes. At least that's what all my identification says. But 3 weeks ago, I woke up and I was Lori. I remembered being 21. I remembered driving home from my study group.
I remembered the truck running the red light. I remembered the impact, and then nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was in this apartment, and 10 years had passed. I have no memory of those years. I don't know who Joyce Hayes is or how I became her. I only know that I remember being your daughter. I remember you. Please, I need answers. I need to know if I'm losing my mind. I'll be back tonight around 8 p.m. Wait for me if you can. L. I checked my phone. 5:47 p.m. I had over 2 hours. I set the note down carefully and opened the refrigerator again, looking for anything else that might explain this. Behind the milk, I found a folder tucked against the back wall. Inside were medical records, dozens of pages printed from various doctors' offices. I spread them across the kitchen counter and started reading. The first document was an intake form from a psychiatric clinic, dated 3 weeks ago. The patient name was Joyce Hayes. Chief complaint: sudden onset of memories that don't match my documented life history. Possible dissociative amnesia or delusional disorder. The psychiatrist's notes mentioned the patient was coherent, articulate, and deeply distressed. She'd undergone a psychological evaluation. Results were inconclusive. The next document was from an emergency room visit, also 3 weeks ago. Joyce Hayes had gone to the ER complaining of memory loss and confusion. The attending physician noted no signs of head trauma, stroke, or neurological damage. CT scan was normal. Patient discharged with a referral to neurology and psychiatry. I kept digging. More appointments, more tests. Everything came back normal. Brain scans, blood work, cognitive assessments. Physically, Joyce Hayes was a healthy 31-year-old woman. Mentally, she insisted she was someone else. Then I found a document that made my blood run cold. It was a records request form from County General Hospital. Joyce Hayes had requested her admission records from March 15, 2015, the night of Lori's accident. I flipped to the next page and saw the hospital's response. Patient records indicate Joyce Hayes, age 21, was admitted to County General Hospital Emergency Department on March 15, 2015 at 11:34 p.m. Patient arrived via ambulance following a motor vehicle accident at the intersection of Hamilton and Oak Ridge Road. Patient suffered severe head trauma, multiple fractures, and internal bleeding. Patient was unconscious on arrival and remained unresponsive for 72 hours. Upon regaining consciousness, patient exhibited severe retrograde amnesia with no memory of identity or personal history. Patient was listed as Jane Doe until identification could be established. My hands started trembling. I read it again to make sure I understood correctly. A woman matching Joyce Hayes' age had been brought to County General the same night as Lori, from the same intersection, with severe injuries and complete amnesia. I flipped through more pages. The Jane Doe patient had spent 2 weeks in the hospital. During that time, no family came forward. No identification was found. Social services eventually got involved. The patient was transferred to a psychiatric facility for additional care and rehabilitation. There was a note stapled to the last page, handwritten by Joyce. "This is me. I was the Jane Doe, but I don't remember any of this. My first memory after the accident is waking up 3 weeks ago in this apartment." I set the papers down and tried to piece it together. 2 young women were in accidents at the same intersection on March 15, 2015. One was identified as Lori Stafford and died. One was unidentified, survived with amnesia, and somehow became Joyce Hayes. But what if they'd made a mistake? What if the identification was wrong? I thought about that night in the hospital, the officer asking me to identify the body, Lori's face, pale and still. I'd been so certain it was her, but I'd been in shock, devastated, barely able to stand. What if in that moment of unspeakable grief, I'd been wrong? No, that was impossible. I knew my daughter's face. I'd given birth to her, raised her, looked at her every single day for 21 years. I couldn't have misidentified her. But the alternative was just as impossible.
that my daughter had somehow survived with complete amnesia, lived an entire decade as someone else and only now remembered who she really was? I pulled out my phone and called my husband. He answered on the second ring. "Sarah, where are you? I've been worried sick." "I'm in Richmond, in the apartment." "And?" "You need to sit down." I told him everything. The clean apartment in the condemned building, the photos of Lori as an adult, the journal entries, the note on the fridge, the medical records showing a Jane Doe patient from the same accident. He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained. "What are you saying? That Lori survived? That someone made a mistake?" "I don't know what I'm saying, but there's a woman named Joyce Hayes who has Lori's birthday, Lori's face, and Lori's handwriting. She believes she's our daughter." "That's not possible. We buried Lori. We watched them lower her into the ground." "I know, but I'm holding medical records that prove a second woman was at that hospital the same night, an unidentified woman with amnesia." "Sarah, this is insane. You're talking about a hospital mixing up bodies. That doesn't happen." "It does happen. It's rare, but it happens. And if there were two patients from the same accident, both young women, both critically injured, both brought in around the same time?" "No." His voice broke. "Don't do this. Don't give us hope when there isn't any. Our daughter is dead. Whatever this woman is, whoever she is, she's not Lori." "Then why does she have Lori's handwriting? Why does she remember the accident?" He had no answer. I heard him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "I'm staying. She's supposed to be back at 8. I need to see her. I need to know." "And what if it's not her? What if you're setting yourself up for more heartbreak?" "Then at least I'll know I tried." He sighed. "Call me after you meet her. Please." "I will." I hung up and looked at the clock. 6:15 p.m. Less than 2 hours now. I sat down on the couch and waited, the medical records spread across my lap, trying to prepare myself for whatever was about to walk through that door.
I couldn't sit still. The minutes crawled by, and my mind raced through every possible explanation, each one more impossible than the last. At 6:45 p.m., I called Dr. Catherine Morrison, the family physician who had been treating us since Lori was born. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Sarah, is everything all right? I need to ask you something about the night Lori died." There was a pause. "Of course. What do you need to know?" "Were there other patients brought in from that intersection around the same time as Lori?" "That was 10 years ago. I'd have to check records. Why are you asking?" I explained everything as clearly as I could. The texts, the apartment, Joyce Hayes, the medical records showing a Jane Doe patient from the same accident. Dr. Catherine listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for several seconds. "Sarah, what you're suggesting, patient identification errors of that magnitude, are extremely rare. But they happen." "Yes, they happen." I heard typing in the background. "Give me a moment. I'm accessing the hospital database from that night." I waited, pressing the phone so hard against my ear it hurt. More typing. Then Dr. Catherine made a small sound, something between surprise and concern. "There were 2 female patients admitted from that intersection within 20 minutes of each other, both Jane Does initially, both with severe trauma." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Both?" "One was identified quickly. Family came to the hospital. That was Lori. The other remained unidentified for 2 weeks. She was unconscious when brought in, severe head trauma. When she woke, she had complete amnesia. No ID was ever found at the scene." "What happened to her?" "According to this, she was eventually transferred to psychiatric care. After several months of treatment, she was released into a supervised living program for adults with memory disorders. There's a note here that she was eventually assigned a legal identity through social services. The name..." More typing. "Joyce Marie Hayes. Birth date assigned as June 8, 1994. Lori's birthday. They'd given the Jane Doe patient my daughter's birthday.
Dr. Catherine, is it possible there was a mistake, that we identified the wrong girl? Sarah, you saw her. You were certain it was Lori. I was in shock. I was devastated. What if I was wrong? Dr. Catherine exhaled slowly. The protocol is thorough. When there's a suspected identification, they check multiple factors: physical description, personal effects, identifying marks. But in a chaotic, emergency situation with two patients from the same scene, both young women, both with similar injuries, mistakes have happened. So it's possible. It's possible, but we'd need definitive proof. DNA testing would be the only way to know for certain. Can you arrange that? I can order a DNA test and compare it against your records. We have Lori's DNA on file from her college physical. If this woman is your daughter, it will be conclusive. She paused. Sarah, I need you to prepare yourself. The chances of this being true are incredibly slim. You could be setting yourself up for tremendous disappointment. I know, but I have to try. Where is this woman now? Joyce Hayes. I don't know. She left a note saying she'd be back tonight, but I haven't seen her yet. More typing. I'm looking at the records request she filed. There's a current address and workplace listed. She works at a bakery in Richmond, Riverside Bakery on Foster Street. According to this, she goes by Sharon at work, Sharon Miller. Why would she use a different name? Maybe she's still trying to figure out who she is. The note said she only remembered being Lori 3 weeks ago. Before that, she presumably lived as Joyce Hayes. The workplace might know her by yet another name before the memory returned. I wrote down the address. Can you meet me here in Richmond? I need someone who knew Lori, someone who can tell me if this woman is really her. I can be there tomorrow afternoon. But Sarah, even if she looks like Lori, even if she sounds like her, that doesn't mean... I know. That's why we need the DNA test. I'll bring a kit with me. In the meantime, do you want the bakery address? You could see her before she comes back to the apartment. See if you recognize her. Yes, please. She gave me the address. Riverside Bakery, Foster Street, 3 miles from where I was sitting. Open until 7 p.m. I looked at the clock. 7:02 p.m. Too late tonight. But I could go first thing tomorrow morning. Dr. Catherine, what if it's really her? What if my daughter has been alive this whole time and I buried someone else? Then we deal with that when we know for sure. One step at a time. I'll see you tomorrow. We hung up, and I sat in the silence of the apartment. Around me were pieces of a life I didn't understand. Photos of my daughter as an adult. Medical records of a woman who didn't exist until the night Lori died. A handwritten note in Lori's unmistakable script. I pulled out my phone and looked at the last text she'd sent me. 5880 Oak Street, Apartment 4B, Richmond, Virginia. 3 weeks ago, a woman named Joyce Hayes awoke remembering she was Lori. She'd been living for a decade with no memory of her real identity. And now she'd reached out to me, the only person who might believe her. The clock ticked past 7:30, then 8, then 8:30. Joyce, or Sharon, or whoever she was, didn't come home. I waited until midnight, dozing on the couch, jerking awake every time I heard a sound in the building. She never showed up. At 12:47 a.m., I left a note on the kitchen counter next to hers. I came. I believe you. I'm staying at the Hampton Inn on Market Street, room 214. Come find me, or I'll come find you. Mom. I took photos of everything one more time, locked the apartment door behind me, and drove to the hotel. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lori's face at 21, then the impossible photos of her at 31, then the woman I'd identified in the morgue a decade ago. At 6 a.m., I got up, showered, and drove to Riverside Bakery. I parked across the street and waited for them to open. At 6:30 a.m., the lights went on inside. At 6:45 a.m., a woman unlocked the front door. She had short blonde hair, And Lori's face. 10 years older.
I watched her through the bakery window for 20 minutes before I found the courage to go inside. She moved behind the counter, arranging pastries in the display case. The way she tilted her head when she concentrated. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear. Small gestures I'd seen 1,000 times. At 7:15, I got out of the car and crossed the street. My legs felt unsteady. A bell chimed when I pushed open the door. She looked up and smiled. A professional, practiced smile. "Good morning. What can I get for you?" Her voice was different, deeper than I remembered. 10 years of living had changed it, but the cadence was familiar, the slight pause before she spoke. I stood there staring at her like an idiot. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. Lori's blue eyes, the small scar above her left eyebrow from when she fell off her bike at age 7, the slight gap between her front teeth she'd always been self-conscious about. "Ma'am, are you okay? I'm sorry, My voice cracked. "Do you know who I am?" Her smile faltered. She studied my face and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or confusion. "You look familiar. Have you been in here before?" "No, I'm from out of town." She set down the pastry she was holding. "This is going to sound strange, but I feel like I know you, like I've seen you before somewhere." "My name is Sarah Stafford." The color drained from her face. She gripped the edge of the counter. "Stafford. You texted me, from my daughter's phone number." "Oh God." She looked around the empty bakery, then back at me. "You came. You actually came. You asked me to." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I didn't think you would. I thought maybe you'd think I was crazy or trying to scam you or something." "Are you Joyce Hayes?" "That's what my ID says, but She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Can we talk? My shift doesn't end until 2, but my manager won't be in for another hour. We can sit." She came around the counter and led me to a small table in the corner. We sat across from each other. This close, I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the slightly different shape of her face. She was older, but she was Lori. "I've been having dreams," she said quietly, "for weeks now. The same ones over and over. I'm younger, maybe 20 or 21. There's a woman watching me. She's always sad. She's always waiting. I wake up and I know that woman is important, that she's someone I love. And then 3 weeks ago, I woke up and I remembered. I remembered being Lori Stafford. I remembered you." "What do you remember?" "Studying for finals, working at the campus bookstore, living at home because dorms were too expensive, driving home that Thursday night." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I remember the truck. I remember the impact, and then nothing. When I woke up, I was in that apartment and 10 years had passed." "But you don't remember those 10 years?" "Nothing. It's like they don't exist. I have paperwork that says I'm Joyce Hayes, medical records, employment history, an entire life I don't remember living. People at work call me Sharon, because that's apparently what I told them when I started here 6 months ago. I don't know why. I don't remember choosing that name." "Do you remember me? Not from dreams. From before." She looked at me and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes, you're my mom. I remember you making pancakes on Sunday mornings. I remember you teaching me to drive. I remember you crying at my high school graduation because you said I looked so grown up." She covered her face with her hands. "But that's impossible, because I died. I found my own obituary online. I read about my funeral. You buried me." I reached across the table and took her hand. It was warm and solid and real. "I did, but I think there was a mistake." She looked up at me through her tears. "What kind of mistake?" "There were 2 patients that night, 2 women from the same intersection. One was identified as my daughter, one wasn't identified at all. She had amnesia. She became Joyce Hayes." Understanding dawned in her eyes. "You think they mixed us up. You think I'm the one who survived and someone else is in that grave." "I don't know.
but I need to find out. I pulled the DNA kit from my purse. Dr. Catherine had overnighted it to my hotel this morning. This will tell us for certain, if you're willing. She stared at the kit. What if I'm not her? What if I'm just some stranger with false memories? Then we'll know. But if you are her... I couldn't finish the sentence. The hope was too huge, too terrifying. She took the kit with shaking hands. How long until we get results? Dr. Catherine said 3 to 5 days. She's our family physician. She has Lori's DNA on file from a physical she had in college. Dr. Catherine. I remember her. She had that office on Maple Street. There was a fish tank in the waiting room. My breath caught. Yes, there was. She opened the kit and read the instructions, swabbed the inside of her cheek, sealed it in the provided tube, and handed it back to me. What do we do now? We wait, and you tell me everything you remember, everything you've been through. She glanced at the clock. I have 45 minutes before my manager gets here. After that, I have to work. Then we have 45 minutes. She told me about waking up 3 weeks ago with Lori's memories, about searching online and finding the obituary that said she died a decade ago, about the apartment she'd apparently been living in but couldn't remember, about the medical records showing she'd been a Jane Doe patient, about the terror of not knowing if she was losing her mind. I've been writing it all down. In a journal, I am Lori Stafford. I am not Joyce Hayes. I am not Sharon Menner. I am Lori. Over and over, like if I write it enough times, it'll become true. I found the journal. I read it. Then you know how crazy this sounds. It doesn't sound crazy. It sounds impossible. But I'm sitting here looking at you, and I see my daughter. I see Lori. The bell above the door chimed. A customer walked in. She stood up quickly, wiping her eyes. I have to get back to work. When can we talk again? I get off at 2. I can meet you somewhere. I gave her my hotel information. She wrote it down on a napkin, her handwriting unmistakably Lori's looping script. Mrs. Stafford? Yes? Do you really think I'm her? Your daughter? I looked at her face, older, but so familiar it hurt. I think you might be. And if you are, I'm bringing you home.
Dr. Catherine called on the 4th day. I was sitting in my hotel room, staring at my phone when it rang. I'd barely left the room except to meet with Joyce twice more. We'd talked for hours at a coffee shop, then at a park, her telling me fragments of memories while I showed her photos from her childhood. Each conversation felt like assembling a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Sarah, I have the results. My hand tightened around the phone. And? It's a match. Joyce Hayes is your biological daughter. Lori is alive. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the bed, unable to breathe. You're certain? Completely certain. The DNA is a definitive match. Sarah, your daughter survived that accident. There was a critical identification error at the hospital. I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you're feeling right now. I wasn't feeling anything. My body had gone numb. 10 years. 10 years of grief, of cemetery visits, of living half a life because I thought my daughter was dead, and she'd been alive the entire time? What about the person we buried? I've been in contact with the hospital and the county coroner. They're reopening the case. Based on the records from that night, the other victim was likely a young woman named Kelly Ann Morrison. She was reported missing the same week as the accident. Her family filed a missing persons report, but she was never found. They're going to do DNA testing to confirm, but the physical description matches. So we buried someone else's daughter. Yes, and her family has been looking for her for 10 years. I thought about Kelly's parents, whoever they were. They'd spent a decade wondering where their daughter was. Now they'd finally have answers, but those answers came with the horror of knowing she'd been in an unmarked grave, misidentified, while they searched. I need to tell Lori. I've already sent her the results. She knows.
Sarah, there's something else you need to understand. Lori doesn't remember the past 10 years. According to the neurologist I consulted, severe trauma can cause this type of dissociative amnesia. She may never remember that time. The woman who lived as Joyce Hayes for a decade essentially doesn't exist anymore in her conscious memory. So she's Lori, but she's also not. She's your daughter, but she's also a 31-year-old woman who lived an entire adult life she can't access. This is going to be complicated for both of you. We hung up, and I sat in the silence of the hotel room. My daughter was alive. I should have been euphoric, overjoyed, screaming with relief. But all I felt was a strange, hollow ache. I'd lost her twice. Once when I thought she died, and again when I realized the past 10 years were gone forever. Years I could never get back. I texted her, "Can we meet?" She responded immediately. The diner on 5th Street, 20 minutes. I drove there in a daze. She was already in a booth when I arrived, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. When she saw me, she stood up. We met in the middle of the diner and held each other while we both cried. Other customers stared, but I didn't care. "You're really my mom," she whispered into my shoulder. "And you're really my daughter." We sat down across from each other. She looked exhausted, her eyes red and swollen. "I don't know what to do now. Dr. Catherine explained everything, but I still don't understand. How do I just go back to being Lori when I don't remember being Joyce?" "You don't have to be just Lori. You're both. You're whoever you are right now." "But I don't know who that is." Her voice broke. "I have 10 years of life I can't remember. A job, an apartment, maybe friends or relationships I don't recall. And I have 21 years of memories from before. I'm stuck between two people." "Then we figure it out together, one day at a time." She looked at me with Lori's eyes in a stranger's older face. "I don't remember you as my mom, not really. The memories feel distant, like they belong to someone else. I remember facts, but not feelings. Does that make sense?" It hurt, but I nodded. "It makes sense. I want to try. I want to know you, but I can't promise I'll ever feel like your daughter again." "I don't need promises. I just need you to be alive." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about the life she was living now, the bakery job she apparently liked, even though she couldn't remember applying for it, the apartment she'd been paying rent on for 8 months, the psychiatrist she'd been seeing since the memories returned. I told her about the past 10 years, about her father who was at home waiting for my call, about her room that I'd kept exactly as she left it, about the Sundays at her grave. "You have to move the headstone," she said quietly. "Kelly deserves her own grave. Her family deserves to know where she is." "I know, the county's handling it. They're going to contact Kelly's family and arrange everything." "Will you tell them I'm sorry? That I'm sorry their daughter was lost because of a mistake?" "It wasn't your fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. It was a horrible error in a chaotic situation." She stared into her coffee. 10 years. We lost 10 whole years. But we have now. We have however many years are ahead of us. That's more than I thought we'd have 4 days ago. I don't know if I'll ever remember those missing years. Dr. Catherine said the memories might be gone permanently. Then we make new ones. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "What if I can't be the daughter you remember? What if I'm too different now?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "Then I'll get to know the person you've become. Lori at 21 was wonderful. I'm betting Lori at 31 is wonderful too." She laughed through her tears. "I'm not sure what I am at 31. We'll figure it out together." We sat there until the diner closed, making plans. She'd come home to visit next month. We'd take things slowly, rebuilding a relationship that had been broken by circumstance. My husband wanted to see her, but understood she needed time. Everything would happen gradually, carefully. When we finally left, she hugged me in the parking lot. "Thank you for believing me, for coming all this way. You're my daughter. Of course I came." I drove back to the hotel and called my husband. He cried when I told him. Then he was silent for a long time. 10 years, he finally said. She was alive for 10 years and we didn't know. I know. We missed everything, her 20s, all of those years. But she's here now. That's what matters. He didn't argue, but I heard the grief in his voice. We'd both lost something irretrievable. The daughter we'd known was gone, and her place was a woman we'd have to meet all over again. 2 weeks later, Kellyanne Morrison was positively identified and moved to her family's plot. I didn't go to the service. It didn't feel right, but I sent flowers and a note to her parents apologizing for a mistake that cost them years of closure. Lori came home a month later. She stood in the doorway of her old room and cried. "It's exactly the same. I couldn't change it. It's like walking into a museum of someone else's life." She stayed for 3 days. It was awkward and painful and beautiful. We were strangers learning to be family again, but we were trying. That was enough. On our last night, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "We can't get those years back," she said. "No, we can't. But we have this right now. Second chances don't usually come like this." I looked at my daughter, older and different, and miraculously alive. No, they don't. We'd lost 10 years, but we had now. And sometimes, now is enough.